Henry Paul talks about how disappointed he was with Gregg Allman's book. We circle back to the very first Outlaws album, which he was a big part of, and one of my favorite songs off the album, Song in the Breeze. Henry Paul on Rock History Music.
I found Gregg Allman's book very disappointing. His language and his assessment of other people, and it just was not very entertaining, and I don't think it did him really a whole lot of good, because Gregg was a brilliant songwriter, and just one of the great singers of our time. He's a smart guy. I don't know why he felt like he had to criticize other people or use, profanity, and it just seemed, it was disappointing when and there's others that aren't. I mean, if you ever read Bob Dylan's book Chronicles, I mean, it reads like a Tom Wolfe novel. I mean, I could not believe how well it was written. So I'm in the middle of an autobiography, and I'm trying really hard to make it. I have an enormous aptitude for detail. I remember everything, and I'm just going through it this year and putting it all down, and it's incredibly detailed, and I think fans of the Southern rock genre, which I was a part of, will be very entertained by the behind-the-scenes recollections that I have.
When's the timeline for that?
Well, I'll be done with it this year. I'm up to chapter 5 right now, so I've probably got anywhere between 60 and 75 pages written. The book will probably come in at about 300 pages, maybe a little bit more with photographs, and I'm using some song lyrics as a counterpoint to the story, just to see how life or art imitates life, and it's going to be really, really good. There's a friend of mine in New York, a guy by the name of Gary Hertz. Gary was my product manager at Arista, and he was a fan. And when I was at Arista Nashville, after I left Arista New York, he and I became really close. He was a guy in my corner. He would write my bios and everything, and he's a great editor. And so I dictate this book to him, and he goes, puts it on paper, translates it, shapes it, sends it back to me. And man, it's just, he's phenomenal, and my recollection is super detailed.
So I find it interesting because, of course, doing what I do, I talk to a lot of people who have just written their books, and they use words like it's cathartic, but it's arduous, and it's but a lot of the times and I get this too, because I'm doing a thing myself, and I'll go, pretty good life, man. You're learning things about yourself. And
well, yes. And if you look at a motion picture and look how much time is spent shooting a film and what you wind up with in the way of a movie, it's kind of like that. You can put a year into this and wind up with a book that you can read in a day and a half or 2 days, so but yeah, it's your one chance to tell the story, literally tell the story in a truthful form and fashion, not knock people down. Yeah, we didn't always see eye to eye in the band, but I loved my bandmates. We were dreaming big and making things come true, and I never got to a point with any one of those people where I didn't like them. And so, you can tell that story without being critical, and I'm just happy that we did what we did. I am, to this day, pleasantly surprised that we did succeed. And when you do that with someone, God, it's like this lifelong bond of accomplishment, and dreams are important. And if you can make them come true with someone, they become very important.
You contributed handsomely, let's say, on that album. There's one of my favorite, Song in the Breeze. I that's one of those songs that stayed with me for a lot of years. I remember that album. I remember that first album. I remember looking at it and thinking, this is a perfect record. This is just 75 was an interesting time, because back then Top 40 radio, and I was wanting to get into radio even back then, played everything. You'd get R&B, you'd get like not too much disco, but dance. You get the country rock stuff, you get the pop stuff, you get the glam stuff, it was an interesting time to come in.
Mm-hmm. And it was, a very specifically stylistic and territorial. You wouldn't be Henry, and I don't I don't refer to myself as to make a point, but you can't be me and buy very far into Ziggy Stardust. You can't. If you're me, you buy into Richie Furay or you buy into Stephen Stills. You don't buy into Ziggy. Stephen is your musical compass. And once you develop a love of music and a style of your own through other people, it pretty much never leaves. You start out and you end on a similar page. You know, Henley took it to a really cool place, especially in the 80s. Boys of Summer was freaking ridiculous. But, you know, I mean, aside from that, you know, The Last Resort and all these songs that he wrote that were so spectacular in their theme and their musical personality. There was guys like the Bee Gees, there were guys like Wild Cherry, you know, then there was, you know, I was of the Bob Seger school, you know, and the Glenn Frey and Don Henley school, and the Stephen Stills and David Crosby and Roger McGuinn. And those were the people that really inspired me.
Song in the Breeze. What tell me about that song.
That, you know, it's a very complex chord progression. I can't to this day believe I wrote it by myself. I don't know where it came from, but man, it hits that chorus and it's so uplifting. Yeah. It's such an odd arrangement. You know, we were never like, hey, verse, chorus, solo, bridge, chorus. It was like verse, chorus, solo, verse, chorus, over. And it was weird the way it was structured. But man, there was a commercial, musical, attractive part to that song melodically. And my voice was, I think, probably really in a great place for that song. Back when I was young in those days, I didn't know about capos and trying to find keys to sing in. I wrote a song and I just sang it in the key that I wrote it in. Because, you know, Black Hawk was different. We would move things around and find that ultimate place to sing a song, but not with the Outlaws in the early days. It was just, you'd write a song, and if you were lucky, it sounded good. Song in the Breeze was kind of like that. Just got lucky. I don't even know what it's about, you know. Most of what we wrote about back then was separation anxiety from our loved ones, you know, because we were gone so much. Mm-hmm. There's a song in the breeze here. It's singing through the trees as it blows along. You will know the tune. Time can heal, so I've been told. If you believe it, you'll behold. All the time we need together is coming soon. Well, we're not together. We're apart doing this, and you're at home doing that. Everything was about that separation.
Shorts, and then we'll be releasing the entire interview. It was a long hour-and-a-half chat with Henry Paul, who was, of course, as you know, a big part of the Outlaws in their early incarnation. Then he left in the 70s, formed the Henry Paul Band, which was successful. And then the country trio Black Hawk, which still tours today. If you want information on Henry, there are links in the description. But man, in this series, does he tell good stories about knowing the Eagles, hanging out with Leonard Skinner, most notably Ronnie Van Zant, their lead singer. Working with Clive Davis, there's so much in this series. If you're a Patreon member, you'll get early access to everything on here. It's pretty juicy stuff. And he's writing a book as well. Remember to pick up a Rock History Music t-shirt and hats. You can get your own Rock History Music baseball cap now. Join our Patreon, as I said, get early access to everything. Links in the description, our TikTok. Check out the Facebook group for Rock History Music. Stay in contact with us. We'd love that. All the information's in the description. I'm John Beaudin. More from Henry Paul in the next 2-3 days. This is Rock History Music.